All right, guys, it's day 4 in our challenge where we're trying to move from surviving to thriving as we move into this new year of 2025. And as we do that, it's important to recognize it's going to be very difficult for any of us to feel like we're thriving if emotionally we're barely hanging on. If emotionally we are in survival mode and we cannot get our crap together, so to speak, it's never going to feel like we're thriving. So, how do we do that? How do we start to recognize that I have emotions? I'm an emotional person, and those emotions are going to keep coming. And what do I do about them? Traditionally, a lot of people think, well, it will be better when. They wait for circumstances to improve so that they can feel better. It will be better when this is over. It'll be better after this. Oh, I can't wait to get to the other side of this. Have you ever noticed that on the other side is just something else waiting to happen? Have you ever noticed that when you do get through that circumstance, there's, yet another one because that's life? We can't wait for circumstances to improve for us to feel better. We have to learn how to feel emotions properly and to actually move through them. See, it's an interesting dynamic about the brain and the way the brain operates. If we were using my hand as a model of that brain, and these front fingers were representative of my logical, rational part of my brain that connect to the brainstem that's sending all the instructions to my body of how to operate. Funny part is when we get very, very emotional, that disconnects from the brainstem, does something we call flips the lid, something we explain in some of our courses. And what happens is when that happens, our logical, rational brain is not driving the bus. So isn't it ironic that when we get the most emotional, we want to sit there and think about it? Isn't it interesting that when you get really, really emotional, your brain and your body are screaming at you to just stop, take a minute, think about it, sit there and think about it, wrap in a blanket and think about it, lay in your bed and think about it. I want you to think about what we tend to do. What are your typical patterns of behavior when you get really, really emotional, whether it's sad, angry, frustrated, depressed, whatever those emotions are, what are you doing? Because if the behavior right now or the pattern of your behavior looks like stop, do nothing, think through it, sit there and think through it, I want you to recognize that that is why there could be a lot of frustration about getting a handle on your emotions. It is really important that we recognize that our brain needs us. This actual brain is a tangible thing. It's a soft tissue. It requires movement. And part of that movement allows us to actually reconnect that prefrontal cortex and bring our logic and reason back to the party. Before we engage with that intentionally in regulation activities, we're not actually thinking. We're trying to think and it's not working well. So if you want to get out of emotional survival mode in 2025, it's going to be very important that you learn how to move through your emotions. That could look like going for a walk. It can look like taking deep breaths. It could look like hitting a punching bag. It could look like jumping jacks, push-ups, burpees. It could look like walking backwards. Actually, for some people, works really, really well. You need to move and you need to find the movements that work for you. You need to engage physically with the symptoms that you feel in those moments. If you get hot, take a drink of cold water. If your stomach starts churning, take a deep breath and go for a walk. If your heart rate is elevated, do something to lean into that and then take deep breaths. There's opportunity to actually physically move through the emotion. And I promise you, as you bring your prefrontal cortex back to the party, it'll be a whole lot easier to think about where we are, why we're there, and what we need to do next. So to stop surviving and start thriving this new year, it's time to start moving.